uniform eccentric loading flowing through progressive patterns of movement. That's my definition of the ideal that is within the original work of Joseph Pilates. The mere assertion that it's an ideal is based on three things out of Joe's book, Return to Life through Contrology. Contrology is complete coordination of body, mind, and spirit, page 11 in the original text. And the very next paragraph after that, contrology develops the body uniformly, ... but that's all I care about is the promise of uniform development. And the sequences. The ritual that's crafted by physics itself, revealed by Joseph Pilates, and who spent a lifetime of consistent expression of the same pattern, the same exercises in the same pattern. Some things evolve and some things don't. And depending on your scale of time and perspective, but it doesn't seem that gravity has evolved too much in our ability to track time and space. And as consistency as gravity has been, that is why the Pilates sequence of exercises is what they are, and why we do them in order to navigate through a uniform gravity field, whether we're on planet or out in space. I've been on this theme of recognizing that more and more when I teach, I'm teaching sentimentally, sensation this, sensation that, and call upon the observer within the sensors to evaluate the two sensations. And in doing an assisted roll down from a springboard or on the Cadillac or with a TheraBand or whatever, just rolling back. When you roll back and your lower back is flat on the surface, you can tell that, versus not being that flat. And sometimes it's hard to point that out. And sometimes when a person looks at you and says, I don't know, they're telling you that their mind can't or isn't receiving the sensation necessary to tell whether or not that's there. And that's not uncommon, because many of us, if not all of us, live to some extent in denial of our bodies, as though we've accomplished becoming angels already, if there be angels. Doctrine usually comes wrapped in ritual to reinforce the doctrine. And it is the ritual, I think, that we crave as a means of participating in the patterns of energy that we're engulfed in, and to assure us that these patterns don't condemn us to a particular state in time and space. So the notes that the scout is sending back to the wagon train is that paying attention matters. And paying attention means doing more than thinking. It means observing your environment and your senses and responding to what you sense. And if nothing else, on this whole breathing thing about when you need air, if nothing else, just in whatever circumstance you're in, you not only turn your attention to your breathing and be an observance of your breathing. Okay, that's not Pilates yet in my mind. It's when you seek to coordinate them, thereby controlling them, or when you seek control, you coordinate body, mind, and spirit. And so in that effort to control your breath, say at the end of an exhale, by denying the inhale and waiting for a response from your body to say, I need air, and then you choosing to give in to that need in a manner that reinforces your movement. Usually you're moving out away from center. So that you're delaying your inhale to trigger instinctual response, and from that instinctual response that you flow with and you ride upon, you move better. And anything that moves better is going to survive in the gravity jungle better and longer than someone who doesn't. Take your brick, put it between your legs, hook your toes underneath something so you can lean back and squeeze the brick to cause the exhale that brings you forward. Genie arms, toes are hooked. Inhale, lean back. Open your mouth, squeeze the brick to cause the exhale. So feel yourself breathing governed by or initiated from the contraction of your inner thighs together. And make sure that your knees aren't locked, and that you try to find a flat lower back as soon as you can before you roll down the rest of the way. Don't lean back in an arch. The only exercise program that doesn't demonstrate its positions. 440, the letter A, third eye, the pituitary gland, the cardioid plexus, autonomic nervous system, intuition, regeneration, autonomic nervous system. So the letter A, 440 hertz. See, when you're intentionally triggering instinctual inspiration, you're leaning on the autonomic nervous system to respond to its need for air that is automatically programmed in the body. And as soon as you start playing rope-a-dope, leaning away from and leaning into that survival impulse, you get very connected to your body and your movement and your breathing, and you get the complete coordination of body, mind, and spirit that you're after, even if it only happens at the end of a few breaths of hundreds or doing one exercise. You're looking for that frequency internally that allows you to be uniformly engaged and in touch with the your sensors that tell you what's going on out there. Okay. Get your brick. Get one that's this thin and not one necessarily that's that thin. Because even though that thin might work initially, ultimately you want this high up in the inner thighs. Squeeze on the meat of the muscle. Don't just have it at the knees, because that encourages a bony kind of thing, rather than we want a muscular kind of thing. where the muscles can fill out against the squeeze of the pad. And this is a comment for those of you that have been teaching Pilates for a long time and have a very special connection to it, a personal connection to it, because I don't think any of us that have done Pilates for a long time cannot have something very personal with it. What you get from Pilates isn't necessarily all there is to be gotten. And I know that when through my career, the times I've spent looking, I've always been amazed at what more I've gotten. But it's also gotten more clear instead of more. The reason for the exercises, whether intentional or not, is apparent and sensational, and you can feel it in your body. And when you take something away that didn't belong there, it feels better in its absence. And when you add something that didn't belong there, it feels worse in its presence. And the things that have become part of more of the traditional mat sequence are things that either fit the ideal within the original sequences, the original exercises and their sequences, or it was an exercise used to get ready for a more traditional exercise that ended up becoming part of the sequence. I'm in favor of reaching for a sensational connection. I'm in favor of expressing the idea within the original sequence of Joe's work, and I'm in favor of expressing the original sequence of Joe's work as documented by Joe. With some exceptions, like bouncing. Percussion on the muscle has proven not to be healthy, and there's no way a pioneer like Joe in his time wouldn't have adopted to the new science and incorporated it into how you performed his sequence.